Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Continuing Conversations. I'm Michael Dismuke. I am a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures RPG, lead writer on Captain's Log RPG, solo RPG, and a fiction writer for Star Trek, which is really cool. Never thought it would happen. Only happened because of the show. So that's why the conversation continues. And there is no conversation unless I have with me my co-pilot, Jim Johnson.
Hey everybody, Jim Johnson. I am the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG and the Captain's Log solo RPG and some other stuff at Modifius that will be coming out in the coming weeks and months. I am also a fiction writer for Star Trek and various and sundry other things. You can find me on my little website right there on my name. And we have some awesome guests here tonight to talk about all things politics in the Star Trek universe. So I will have our guests introduce themselves. First, we have a Star Trek Adventures superfan. If you're familiar with the Discord and Reddit, and I think the Facebook group and some other places, you see his name all over the place. Will Parker, introduce yourself, sir.
Hi, I'm Will Parker. I'm definitely a super fan of Star Trek. Been in running game for 5 years now, and I literally don't have a formative memory of being introduced to Star Trek. It was just always a fact of my life.
And just for everyone knows, just search him, go to continuing missions and search Will Parker, and all the goodness that he's been pumping out has been ending up on the blog. And again, this is the invitation to all of you out there creating cool fan-made stuff. If you want to immortalize it somewhere besides your own computer, continuing missions is always the perfect spot for you. And Will Parker, you've used it. I used your stuff, and I love seeing it every time you present an article or some new game mechanic or some new cool tool for us to use.
Yeah, absolute shout out to continuing missions. And I thought it would be like this whole big deal of like I have to get approved and vetted and everything. And nope, I just literally just emailed. Michael said, "Hey, I have this crazy idea. Here's my article," and he threw it up there. So if you have any fan made stuff, absolutely just communicate with Michael and let's get it to the rest of the community.
Exactly. We'll make sure it's good. We'll make sure we don't get in trouble with Paramount by putting anything that's copyright or anything like that. Jim always makes sure of that. But we love it. And then as per tradition, Will, you're the first time on our show, so you have to tell us your favorite Star Trek character and your favorite series.
There.
I am particularly partial to Captain Kirk. I really like his bravado, kind of narrated well style, but he acts brash, but he's actually really intelligent. I like how they juxtapose that. Favorite air series, Deep Space Nine has definitely caught my heart in my 20s and 30s, and Strange New Worlds has definitely creeped up there. A little slow on the upkeep on getting episodes out, but always worth it every time.
Very good selections. You make Jim happy.
Right. And I'll also note that those of you who are watching and playing Star Trek Adventures, if you have successfully made the conversion from first edition to second edition and you no longer have a need for your challenge dice, reach out to Will, because he will gladly take your challenge dice, because he loves the challenge dice and he's not afraid to talk long and frequently about it. So if you need a new home for your challenge dice, send them to Will. He'll make a wall or something.
Right.
I'll make a wall for them.
And of course, we have a returning guest today, one of our favorite people to come on the show and contributors. Introduce yourself, Aaron Harvey.
Hey, I'm Aaron Harvey. I am the co-writer and designer of Star Trek, the animated series, official guide to the animated series. And I also worked on the Star Trek Adventures supplement for Star Trek Adventures. And I've done comic book covers and stuff like that too.
Yeah. You'll be happy to know I finally got a chance in our final episode of the current game we're playing to introduce one of the characters from the animated series, cool. A guy that you did. Tarek Al is the Orion. Is that his name? Tarek Al? I can't remember that. The Aurelian.
Aurelian, yes. Yes.
Tarek Al. Yeah. So happy I had those stats. So we've introduced him into our game, which is cool.
And Aaron, you've done some of the artwork for Last Excelsior, correct?
Yes, actually behind me is one of the things that I did. I have just been, it was one of those, I wanted to do a poster and then I kind of challenged myself to do one every week. And then that got a little ridiculous. So it's not every week at this point. But I did that. And then I'm working on a design for their space probe called Gidget, that also has a name of Peaches. It's like you have to watch it. It makes sense. So I'm doing the Peaches, Captain Peaches right now. So they're going to put I guess they've made it now an NPC. So it's gone from being like this kind of thing that they just mentioned to now it's an NPC.
Nice. I love the personalization. All right.
Yeah.
So we really have a fun topic tonight. In fact, it was originally suggested by Will Parker. And it's about the politics and factions of Star Trek. I don't know about you out there listening, you out there playing, but I know in our game, which has run 5 seasons long over blah, blah, blah years since Star Trek Adventures launched, but we've introduced our own factions. We've seen a lot of factions on the TV shows. One of my favorites is the Fenris Rangers. I'm dying to learn more about them. I was so happy to read David Mack's novel called Firewall. If you haven't read it, read it. And I think we all are intrigued by people like the Obsidian Order, the Tal Shiar, Section 31, even some of the smaller divisions of Star Trek you don't hear too much about would be at Starfleet Corps of Engineers, right? So there's all these politics and factions going on in Starfleet. And we want to talk and kind of riff about how you include these into the game. Maybe we can go around and get first an introduction from all of you. We'll go Aaron, Jim, then Will. Who's your favorite faction or polity in Star Trek and why?
I would probably say, I don't know. For some reason, I've really found, and we put this into the animated series supplement, the Aurelian and the Score. They're sort of like a Romulan and Vulcan kind of combo. So that I've always found really interesting because there's hints to it in the episode called The Jihad. And then you don't get much more of it. So it's kind of ripe for just being able to explore as well. So that's one of my reasons I really like that.
I love loose ends. I love loose ends in Star Trek because for players and game masters, it lets you do world building. Very good choice. Jim, what about you? What factions and politics intrigue you?
I think the culture that most interests me, aside from the Federation, is probably the Romulans. Partly because Next Generation DS9 Next Gen and DS9 especially were really, really formative, and the Romulans always seem to be that really good adversary for Picard to deal with. Like, I mean, Tomalak was a great example, but like a lot of different episodes had really interesting machinations with the Romulans, and I think that whole period of time is there's just so much you can do with it. Even if you go back to the Romulan War with Earth, and then all the way out to their whole story arc with the supernova, and then becoming the Romulan diaspora at the end there. I think there's just so much cool stuff that you can do with it, and I love the Romulans because like you don't know what to believe, right? Because and we've done episodes on the Romulans before, but there's just so many nuances in there that you can play with, and it all feels right.
Yeah, why don't you mention too? Picard introduced a couple new factions, right?
The Zadvash and the Co-op Milot, right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, which was super cool, right? 2 new factions and juxtaposed or part of the Tal Shiar, we don't know, and right, which was some mission. Yeah, it was really cool. How about Will? When it comes to politics?
I'm actually really intrigued by kind of the more civilian and shadier types like the Maquis and the Fenris Rangers, how they're like doing the freedom fight that Starfleet is too afraid to do. Like they're doing the fight that Starfleet can't get involved because it would drag them into a war.
Yeah, dirty hands. Huh? I mean, almost a little bit of Section 31 there when you mentioned it. Definitely, they're dirty hands all over the place when you get a chance. And
doing dirty deeds for good reasons.
Yeah, kind of. Right. Some players want that. Some groups actually want to be those bad guy ruffian, types, which I think is totally cool if you have a game like that. So let's talk about this real quick from a sci-fi perspective. What makes Star Trek politics distinct from, say, traditional sci-fi or fantasy politics? Would you say if people had to find differentiators from, say, I'm going to just drop some other rival sci-fis out there like Dune or Star Wars, what's special you think about Star Trek?
I think a lot of Star Trek, you have a very unified one concept per government, which is interesting because like if you look at Dune and other things, I wouldn't say there's more depth to it, but there's more parts to it, and this feels like very clean and manageable, I guess. It's like, so I think that's one of the things that's a big differentiator, because you also hear people talk about it who aren't Star Trek fans who are like, oh, that's just, oh, that's so simple, that's not how things would work, so you kind of get both sides.
Yeah, some people get upset with the utopia concept, right? They feel it conflicts with what the reality of humanity is.
Digging a little too deep on how do Federation citizens have private property? Yeah.
I saw an 1.5-hour video about that, and it had no ending. It's like, okay, great.
Well, you make a good point. I was actually doing research lately on Turkana 4, because at the end of Section 31, they say that's where they're going. And I don't know if any of you caught the connection, but Turkana 4 is where Tasha Yar is from. And the year and placement setting of Section 31 is 2330. So that would have been, I think, 37 years before Tasha Yar came about into Starfleet. So I'm like, what the heck happened to this Federation colony? Ended up becoming
like within 10 years, something happened.
I can't even say off my mouth what it became. Tasha Yar said it. Go watch the episode. That it became and degenerated in a generation to that. And like, what an epic story that would be to tell, because they walked away from the Federation. They cut off the Federation. So imagine retelling that story pre-Tasha Yar years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what did Section 31 have to do with that too? Again, sorry, I'm going to riff.
Anyways.
So what the heck did Georgiou do and her team to blow up stuff? Because they obviously didn't help the situation. So I think there's a novel to be told there with that faction.
Someone they broke something. Better.
Yeah. Or they fixed something that like it could have been much worse maybe if they were there.
Oh God.
That's what they'll say, at least.
I think when I really brainstorm about it, I think that Section 31 probably went there to extract someone or something before the complete downfall.
They saw the writing on the wall and
yes. And I would actually probably write that into the story, that they didn't go to save them. They went to extract someone or something.
You can see that.
Dum, dum, dum. Okay, sorry. Okay, so with that said, let's talk about this for a second. How would you run a mission centered on political negotiation, diplomacy, or espionage that avoids devolving into, say, pure combat? Pew pew pew. Because really, with factions and politics, you're not talking about warfare necessary, right? So, what would be your ideas about that? Will, you want to start? You offer. So I'm giving you the tough question.
I make the idea of war just too costly. Like, we can't afford to get into a war, or if you mess this up, like the entire Federation, all 150 planets are going to get dragged into this conflict. You are the one stopping this. Do your job.
Ooh, I like that. And you can get so many polities involved on one single issue.
Yeah, like a Journey to Babel.
Yeah, that you're talking about TOS, that episode there, yeah, with the fake Andorian.
Yep. Yeah, it was originally a conference with a bunch of different polities, and they were kind of bickering about it on the ship before the murder happened.
With Star Trek Adventures, then, how would you, what are the type of mechanics that Star Trek Adventures leans to so that you can actually have just a political game without having to have all this maybe science roles, engineering roles, and stuff like that? How would you manufacture that?
Either or do a social conflict, or if it's something bigger and grander, or I might set up an extended task as to create the treaty, and each breakthrough is like a specific clause that we worked on.
I love that idea. I love that.
I didn't want to give my answer first. I wanted someone else to say it. I would definitely lean into the social conflict rules and encourage the players and the game master to load up on traits and then see what happens. Maybe throw a challenge at them. Maybe definitely the extended task, I think. But I think just really lean into the social conflict rules that Nathan put together and further defined in the second edition core book, and really get into that whole negotiation, persuasion kind of shtick. Like the example he puts in there, I think it was in the second edition book, between Picard and Madrid, where they're trying to torture him and get the information out of him. I mean, there's just so much great stuff in there that you can play with. That I would love to have the right group of players to do that kind of a scene with. In my past, other player groups I've had just didn't have quite that interest in that kind of thing. But if I had the right group of players, I think it would be really, really cool.
I'm all about that. Like, I'm all about the sorry for borrowing from another franchise, the Andor of the politics. Sorry, because this season's Andor is like creme de la creme. Like, I love that like, who do you talk to and who do you need to meet and who do you have to have back alley deals with in order to succeed. And we know that Starfleet's done this. They try to pretend like they're all clean and pristine, but we know they're not, especially not the Vulcans. Sorry, don't get me started.
And not to continue.
Or Cisco.
Yeah, or Cisco, yeah. But just to build on your example, Michael, like all those scenes with Mon Mothma at the parties and at the Senate, like all those little conversations that are happening here and there, that's all dramatic gold right there, because there's so much subtext happening there that you need to watch it like 2-3 times to really pick up all the nuances. It's awesome.
Is there trait building in there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there is.
Yeah. Let's go back to Star Trek before I annoy people. Can you share examples? Let's go around and marinate kind of on the political dilemmas we've seen in Star Trek, and then we'll kind of compare like how you would play that out in a Star Trek in a Star Trek Adventures campaign. So when you think of political or faction drama in Star Trek, what do you think of? Aaron, I'll let you go first this time.
There's a lot of cultural political type of things. Like, say last night we were watching not Cosmic. What is it? Where they try to revitalize the sun and the guy has to kill himself at age 60 on Next Generation.
Yes.
Shoot, I cannot remember the name. Anyway, Timothy. Actually, one of the things at the end we were saying, hey, wouldn't it be interesting if the Section 31 weaponized his research and created the Romulan supernova? But anyway,
I'm taking notes.
You're right. That's what David Mack said, which was like, oh, maybe it'll show up in a book eventually. But I thought it was really interesting that, this was a very personal thing between Lwaxana and him, and that just ballooned into essentially warships show up in front of the Enterprise. So I think you can actually really take a small personal connection, and you can use that to expand and still create a giant story, but and also not cause a war at the same time.
So it sounds like you would need someone who has distinct, precious / valuable knowledge and make them the crux of the political negotiation kind of thing, is what you're saying?
Yeah. You could even have like a family member or something. It always is interesting when somebody runs into another, like some Star Trek books. So they'll be in the middle of a hostage situation and they realize, oh, that's my sister-in-law or whatever. It's just like, which is maybe a little bit on the cheesy side, but it can be used.
I mean, that sounds like a threat spun to me.
Yeah, like a reversal or a reveal, right? Now there's a 4-point reveal, which is like, oh, this throws the characters off, or a complete reversal where I like that. I like that a lot. And what about you, Will, then? What political dilemma that we've seen in Star Trek do you think would make for a good RPG session?
I was thinking about this today, and literally just the Kobayashi Maru scenario where you have a civilian ship, but it's on the other side of the border, and you're the only ship in range. Do you risk the treaty and possible conflict with the Klingons to save 300 people, or do you stay within the law and let those 300 people die?
Do you push it to be an extreme faction so that people on the ship are kind of split over it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Who'd be the worst faction? Like right now, Gorn, right? Strange New Worlds, like saving 300.
Yeah, Gorn are definitely possible. I would like to see the Sheliak from
interesting.
Yeah, the super legalistic Sheliak, and just like get into political fights at the border.
I hope someone writes the Sheliak Book of Law one day, because that's going to be super fun. That would be like
5-volume set.
Right. And you have to like they definitely have AI, because there's no way you get through that law. They must have the most advanced AI, because they can ask for a law and it just spits it out. What about you, Jim? What political drama do you think would make a great RPG session?
Gosh. With the right group, I think anything Klingon with the High Council would be ripe for all kinds of high drama and dudgeon and honor and all that stuff. Like the whole like when in next gen when Gowron and Duras and stuff split up the High Council, and there's that whole Klingon Civil War. Like I want to run the game of everything leading up to that, where the Klingon High Council eventually just fractures and the whole thing devolves into civil war. Like how did that all play out? Who are the moderates? Who are the extremists? Like how did it all just come apart? Beyond what Worf was responsible for. But I think Klingons are a good one for like that high dudgeon kind of diplomacy and negotiation.
Yeah. I think for those people going into like, if players want to go into the 32nd century too, reforming the Federation could be super interesting.
Yeah.
As like, how do you, because you have to restart treaties, right? You got to redo treaties, you got to redo borderlines, maybe. Who gets help to rebuild first, allocation of resources. Like, I think that would actually be kind of a really fun game to play, is rebuild.
It's almost like a sim game or something.
Yeah. Right.
Not to go too far into the riffing, but it would also be really fascinating if you could keep it all straight. I would probably need a whiteboard or something. But like in the 27th century, like during the temporal wars, like what happened that led up to the temporal accords, right? Like all those different factions and governments that got together to say, okay, we need to get this time thing sorted out. Stop it, because this is too much.
As the GM who's dabbled in time travel, not even once. No, don't do it. Time travel just breaks everything.
Yeah,
it does.
Causality and reason just go out the window. Just ask my players.
I still have a dream. I mean, one of the corners of the universe I'm hoping one day they explore in Star Trek is the Romulan Free State, like, and then the Borg artifact, right? Like how do you? And we've talked about it before on the show. Like, the Romulans have just as many planets with diverse species as the Federation. They just don't brag about it and they don't showcase it. So as the Romulan Star Empire starts breaking up, how do you allocate those different planets with different species into a new governmental structure? Like, that would be that's Star Wars level at this point. Like rebellions and
Beta Quadrant's a mess, basically.
Yeah, the Beta Quadrant is a mess, and who's sorting it out? Like, what a fantastic game that would be, right?
Some of that would be the Fenris Rangers, I imagine.
Well, see, I don't think I thought about that, but the Fenris Rangers are more just Robin Hoods. I feel that they're just helping the most desperate people get out. I don't feel like they're trying to keep people in the Romulan Empire as much as get people out. I don't know if that's your read.
I feel like they're more like vigilantes. They're just like in the area, just keeping the peace however they can. If they see pirates, they'll punch them. If they see someone in distress, they'll help them. But they're not really organized, and they're not really like have long-term plans.
Right. I would love to see a character, even going again to David Max Firewall book, which did not happen. I would love to see a character rise out of the Fenris Rangers with a clear motivation for them, besides just reactive to problems. Like, who would do that? Like, that would be, to me, that's the next novel, is who takes the Fenris Rangers and forms them into this is what we're going to do to improve this area of the galaxy.
Riffing off of that, you could also, if you wanted to play 32nd century, jump forward and see what happened with the Fenris Rangers in between that time period. Like, did they become kind of their own little mini federation, or how did once they were kind of separated because of the burn, like what happened? Did they kind of step in and take over that role?
Yeah, what did happen to them? Those are good. You're gonna stun me. I'm gonna be stuck in thinking. Okay, let's do this to bring it back, because I think No. This is awesome. These are my favorite episodes, by the way, where we do this. It feeds my creative fuel, but we want to feed the creative fuel of GMs also, and players, if they want to start introducing political themes into their game. So what real world political themes do you think are most ripe for adaptation to Star Trek Adventures at this time? I drop the mic, I back up, I put myself on mute.
Definitely the idea of a political inversion of a nation used to be one way, and then kind of as a reaction, the population shifts to the different and extreme, and just seeing that over the terms of a generation. Like you could have a reaction to where Martok kind of takes the Klingon Empire to more like liberal, friendly. Hey, yeah, we're gonna get along with everyone. Yeah, you're so long as you're honorable, you can and hang with us. As to maybe there's a backlash and the next chancellor is just super hardcore Klingon only, and just kind of seeing that pendulum swing back and forth. And like, how do you respond to that?
That's awesome. I love that one because one thing about Star Trek Adventures, you can choose your era when you play. And I've heard of groups that actually play a couple games in one era and then go to a different era to see the effects of that. And I would love to see some players create. Yeah, right.
Like, and I did a game. Yeah, I did an experimental game once where it was like an anthology game where we played in like 4 distinct eras for like 4 games each, and we just like followed this trail throughout like 3,000 years. It was interesting.
Epic. I would love a game like that. That's so good. Aaron, what were you gonna say?
I don't know what to say this, but sorry. You could do something with if you're doing lower decks, which is something that is like bringing the Orions in, because we have like there's some interesting Orion factions. If you look at TAS and then you look at where they are in lower decks, something's happened in between there. There's the matriarchy basically collided or something. You also notice that the symbol on their clothes changes over to Tendy's family. So like something happened, like just what is it? They're guild wise.
Okay. How would that reveal? Like, how does that compare to real world politics? Because that's what we were kind of.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Oh, are you just riffing? Okay.
No, that was yeah. That's why I was like, when you said, "What do you remember?" I was like, "That was never mind." Yeah, I think real world politics, you could do something with Ferengi and have about late stage capitalism and just resource management and allocation.
Well,
I think there's.
Well, even in the Federation, they still have to manage resources and have to like get the duranium and the dilithium from point A to point B. So they have to set up trade lanes. What if that trade lane's through someone's backyard? I don't want you shipping this stuff through my territory. And they have to figure out how to defend the trade lane, make sure that no one's going to pirate it. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that can come up just from making big projects.
And even without doing that,
did you say tariffs? Did you say
hologrammed rights? Because we have the copies of the Doctor, basically binding dilithium, and it's like, why is that happening? So,
Jim, what do you think when it comes to real world politics? How you might tie it into a game?
This is such a dangerous topic.
In it though, but that's what RPG's for. You can explore
it's what RPG, it can be what RPGs are for, but it's definitely what science fiction is for, right? Science fiction,
absolutely,
taking real life political issues and putting an alien veneer on it, so you get a little bit of distance from it, and you can safely talk about it without. Oh, it's not humans. It's the.
I heard someone say that at Star Trek. Act might have been in place in the 2260s, but it's not about the 2260s. It's about the 1960s.
That's right.
It's about the era it's created, not the era it's projected in.
Yeah. And somebody said about dystopias, it's like it's not projecting or predicting the future. It's about criticizing the current day.
Correct.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So as long as my players were all on board with exploring real life political stuff, I'd be all for it. That being said, we get plenty of it in the news. We may not want it in our game, right? It's like, I don't want this in my game. I can just go turn on the news and listen to this, right?
You cannot escape it, even if you try to escape it. That's part of the problem.
But I think there's plenty of current themes right now that would make really fascinating Star Trek stories. And I'll give you 2 examples. First one is the Federation suddenly has a leader who just doesn't care about the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the entire Federation has to kind of deal with that. And it's like, wait a minute, you don't. These aren't important. Like, these are our founding documents. What do you mean you don't care? And he's like, no, I'm just gonna go do whatever.
Prime directive, schmime directive. No.
Yeah. Okay. So
I feel like my players would go into coup like immediately.
And then the other one, I think it would be fascinating to pick up the threads of the synth ban. right? And like have it focus on the synth rights. Like why are the synth being discriminated against? You got plenty of modern parallels to race and gender and lack of equality and all that stuff. But like maybe we need to be more pro synth. And so there's a whole pro synth movement, and there's an anti synth movement happening in the Federation, and you got all these activists on both sides trying to decide how that works out. And instead of the Federation just outright banning synths, maybe make a fight for that. And I think the same thing could be said for holograms too. I think there was a point where holograms were frowned upon, and
holograms be free.
There's a lot of grist there to play with.
Yeah, I mean, I go, as we're riffing, I'll go to red dye number 3, right, which was banned. Like, what if there's a food additive that one species has been selling to another species, and make it sci-fi over an extended period of time, like 500 years, and some scientist has proved that only over 500 years and 20 generations is there some adverse effect, but they make so much money off of it. They've become wealthy, and like you could take a red dye number 3 situation and put it into a sci-fi context and have the crew have to go in there and support or find contrasting evidence as to what it is. And then how do you then convince a society to change its whole economic basis for something, right? So we see stuff going on in the news all the time that you can really inflate and exaggerate, which is the sci-fi point, which I find, right? So good. Yeah. So encourage people just to take that. We know that there's a lot. We always talk about safety first. Have your session zeros. Everyone has to enjoy the game, but you can even find stuff that's consistently on the news that's small and maybe not so politically inflammatory, and bring it in, and people will start making those connections, which is kind of fun to do. I love doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, you get the AI ban with, that in itself, it's like kind of can talk about what we're doing today, or the Romulan refugee crisis. There are bits and pieces that can, they don't have to be so on the nose, but they're components of what we are going through.
Yeah, for sure. And not to go too far into the riffing, but one other example I just thought of, that DS9 episode where there's that Cisco and O'Brien find that colony led by Alexis, who are like, no, we're anti-technology, right? So if you like, the Federation creates or develops this charismatic individual who is virulently anti-modern medicine, like anti-modern Starfleet medicine, and it's like, no, you don't need all that modern technology. You can go with the old school pharmaceuticals and whatnot. And it's like, don't do these things that'll obviously save your life. Go old school.
Gene therapy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I just tied with gene therapy, and people, the people in Star Trek like hyperbolize it into, oh no, Khan and superhumans. Like, no, sometimes we just need to do gene therapy to stop people from having cystic fibrosis. Like,
yes. The whole Illyrian episode, my favorite episode of Strange New World, season 2, episode 1, is just like, that was just like my dream of a great political, legal episode. I watched that so many times. I'm going to watch it again tonight because I've mentioned it several times this past week. I think I'm surprised with both Will and Jim here on board that no one mentioned the Bajorans and how to have a game about getting someone to become a member of the Federation, that the planet maybe has resources, and the Federation basically sends your crew and says, we really need them. Don't let them know that, but we really want them. And you're going to have to use a lot of traits and an extended task over possibly months or years, because we really need to have them join the Federation, and then creating complications along that route.
That's dangerous though, right? I was avoiding that because that veers into colonialization and colonizing, and that's
something in kind of weird about the colonization, and we're gonna make everyone just like Starfleet. Well, what if I have my own specific cultural traits that I want to keep? We have a long history of slavery. Are you gonna be okay with that?
Right. But that's what Starfleet is about, is dealing with that. To me, it's write that in. What if there's a culture where slavery is actually a great honor? Think about the Tosh.
Oh yeah,
Tosh.
As being the guy who's getting
right. Look at that amazing first season episode where it's just oh wow, okay, this is different.
I introduced a alien species. There are obligate carnivores, and they have to eat mammalian brains to survive. So it's like you're kind of incompatible with our species stuff. Like, well, we're people too. We just need to eat brains because if we don't, we die.
Oh, that's
and just
great.
like how do you incorporate these guys into the greater galactic community where 90% of people they just think is food.
Right. Do mosquitoes have the right to live? That's
Yeah.
right. I love that. I really love that. That's great. And again, people listening at home, this is what you want to do: is expound, exaggerate, and have this. Okay, so I have a question. I would love to see. I don't know if you all remember the Voyager episode with the Voth, and okay, everyone nodding. Two out of three are nodding their head. And whatever happened to that small cell of science-based people who were shut down for religious authority, where we're like, no, don't talk about our origin, right? Our origin is this origin, and that's it. Like I always wondered whatever happened to that scientific cadre. Like, what an amazing story that would be if they came back to Earth, they followed the path to the Delta, from the Delta Quadrant to the Alpha Quadrant, and said, we need you to help us liberate our people with truth being the political issue here. How do you?
I might be wrong, but I seem to remember that there was actually the Voth star like marked on a map in Discovery in the 32nd century. Like, so I don't know
in
if
the
that
Delta
means,
Quadrant.
Yeah, because they had a bunch of stuff like Talaxian homeworld and.
Really?
Yeah, I think I might be wrong, but I remember we freeze framed the thing and just kind of like, yeah, I'm an Easter egg guy, so that was that's my thing.
Okay, so I got to research that. Thank you for that. But imagine what kind of game that would be for them begging the Federation to help them tell the truth. How do you think that would play out?
Or what if the Voth come back to Earth and say, well, this is our home planet. We came here. What are you guys doing here?
Oh.
Ancestral claims. Ancestral claims.
That's even better. So that could be a third faction then. So you have one that believes it but wants ancestral claims, one that believes it and wants unity, and the people who refuse to believe it. I'm stunned. Very rarely.
So,
I know
three-way Voth Civil War.
This is a black alert. I've been stunned into silence. I have to let someone take it because I need to marinate on that for a little bit.
Okay. Shall we jump on to another question then? I love that idea, by the way. And I would love to see a fourth faction show up related to the progenitors and say, oh, we're also part of the progenitor species, and they gave us 1% extra of their DNA, and so we're equal, but just you're first among equals, and you all are in our image too, and then just add that to the sauce and see what happens.
Oh, that's a dangerous idea.
Star Trek, the Voth dilemma.
Yeah,
you could have the Saurians, like, since they are also based on dinosaurs. That'd be interesting to have them as like negotiators.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have a little bit of both.
All right, so let's shift a little bit here. I'll throw another question at you all here. Thinking of all the different I don't like that question. I'm going to switch to another question. If you are playing a campaign of Star Trek Adventures, what are some interesting ways you could use internal Starfleet politics, such as Section 31, Starfleet intelligence, etc., to complicate your campaign? So maybe your campaign's cruising along, and you want to throw a political wrench into it. What would you do? Will, you got your hand up going?
Dibs. I actually have this as a key conflict in my game where it's set up in the Shackleton and Expanse, and the Federation director of Shackleton and Expanse is anti-Starfleet. He doesn't want Starfleet out here. He wants to disband it. He wants us to not be poking our nose in strange new worlds and getting it bitten off by the Dominion. And so he's like fighting tooth and claw to stop the players from doing what they came out here to do, to explore and seek out things and stuff, and just using that. He's a civilian, but as a civilian in oversight committee, he has like authority over Starfleet in general. Also, there's this like push and pull between like the rear admiral and this director of like how to get the players to actually go out and do the missions. And every time there's like a decree or a law saying, no, we can't go here, it's too dangerous, you need to pull back.
I love that.
I like that, and I would pair them up with a Klingon who's all pro exploration.
Yep.
And just flip it around and say, and the Klingon being confused, like, I thought you were Federation. I thought you were all about exploration and discovery, and you'd rather sit back and cower.
Well,
Well, Klingon Empire goes out and explores.
yeah, I love that because I work, many people may know that during my day job, I work for a not-for-profit affordable housing developer. And even though there's laws and money to build housing, there's always this small subcommittee. Sometimes they're called NIMBYs, not in my backyard, that throw in like, well, there's an ancient tree frog that may or may not have bred here in 1932, and therefore it's a historical, it's like there's always something thrown in by people who are looking for any reason not to have like the person who works at Starbucks live next door to them, right? And so like I would love something like that takes those kind of issues and shows that you have to work through all these different layers of entitlements to get anything done in a huge organization like Starfleet. I love stuff like that.
It comes from San Francisco, so that makes sense.
Right? Exactly.
Michael, I'm going to use that as a complication someday. Ancient tree frog.
Just do it. Just do it. I mean, it's amazing the reasons people come up with. It's like, well, the population is too dense. It's like, well, wait, all these people work for you in your house all day. They just can't be here at night sleeping just so they can come work for you tomorrow. It's like really funny.
Ridiculous. Did we get everybody?
No, I one of the things I would thought of would be, and I don't know, like we talked about time travel and can be a mess, but the Temporal Integrity Commission. It's like, what are they? Who's in charge of them? Like there's got to be a bunch of like just politics that you can get between Starfleet and Starfleet, I guess. And just like, and what happens when they get involved if you didn't even know anything happened? Like I could just see them just showing up one day and you're just like, wait, what's happening? So maybe you do something in the future that you haven't already done yet. I think you could do some really interesting things to tie people in knots.
They just show up one day. Yeah, you've been in 47 time loops for the past month.
47.
Oh no! Yeah,
I love that you said that too, because 2 months ago, by the time this airs, Merrick Moyer's free mission brief packet on the Department of Temporal Investigations, it would have been out 2 months. And the one thing I was thinking, Aaron, when I was reading that, is like, who gives them the right? Like, when was it established? And so, who gives them the right over here to dictate over here? And that would be so much fun, like political drama.
That's actually a key conflict in the temporal war. Who gave you the authority to decide what we can and cannot do with time travel? So just that idea, but larger.
Yeah, we threw that in a little bit even in the animated series, because we had Spock time traveling and we had Thalen, who was like from a different continuity essentially, but he is also there. So it's just, that was kind of fun to just bring that up and redact things and just like take them out.
So in my game, in our very final episode we're playing right now, 2 of the characters are the founders of the Department of Temporal Investigations in their last episode.
Very nice. I just want to make a quick aside. Will, nice job dropping the 47 reference.
That between AIM 47 and Faith of the Heart I have a dollar jar just for them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then as I was listening to you all, I just had this momentary rift come into my head where you were talking about who created the DTI in the first place, and then somebody showing up and saying, hey, you just violated 47, you just made 47 violations. What if there was like a Rasmussen type of character who shows up to a ship and says, hey, I'm from the DTI, you just violated 6 violations, but he's not really, or he or she is not really from the DTI. How would you know? Right. If they've got some fancy device or some fancy gizmo that can be more advanced than yours, then and they're trying to pass themselves off as DTI, then like, how would you know? Because you're not supposed to talk about it.
Well, we got a taste of that. Remember TNG?
So when my players yell at me in 3 months,
remember TNG? There was like that episode where that guy came and frauded like he was and he was like, I'm here to study you historically. I love that episode.
Max Headroom.
Yeah.
So in 3 months, when I play this episode for my players, I'm going to blame it on you, Jim.
By all means, I'll take that blame. Happy to do it.
Yeah, we've touched on a little bit. So it sounds like some of you have created new factions or political entities in your game, and it shaped your story somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What was yours, Will?
I have a a couple. Let's get the highlights here. One of them is the Thoth Institute, which is kind of a cabal of evil mad scientists who decided I don't want to play by the rules, so I'm going to make my own government over here where the government rules is we don't have to play by the rules. And they do older mad scientists and stuff together, and the big thing is they sell their air tech to like the Romulans and the Tal Shiar and all the other shady governments. In exchange, those governments recognize them as a polity. Like, yes, this is a whole nation there, and the Federation just won't acknowledge them as a nation because as that will afford them certain rights, like, you know, we actually have to declare war with you, and we have to like go through international policies and stuff. So there's this weird air tension of like this bunch of mad scientists who are pretending to be a nation, and half the galaxy acknowledges them and the other half like don't, but it's
Love
on
that.
political lines.
Love that. Sounds like an or some organizations that exist in the world today. So that makes total sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. How about you, Jim or Aaron? Have you ever created your own polity?
You know, I did, and it was totally unintentional because I started the campaign, and I wanted to get away from the traditional Alpha Beta Quadrant species, which, in my opinion, I think was a mistake because there's so much great stuff to play with there. But I thought, you know, let's go do something new and bold and different, and that's what the players were kind of on board with. And so I created this region of space, and I was influenced by Aaron Pollier talking about how the star clusters get denser the more toward the galactic core you get. So I had the crew going off to this dense cluster of stars where there was this whole civilization built around building space stations and stuff. There was actually two other factions involved, and it was meant to be like a two-parter opening episode, and then I would go off and do new exploration stuff. But we ended up kind of collaboratively making these three factions so interesting that the group ended up spending like 14 sessions just with these machinations, and I kept adding more machinations to it, and by the end of it I was like, oh man, we just created this whole little thing, and they never really went beyond that in the time that we played it, which is, you know, not a bad thing. But we ended up spending a whole lot more time there than expected, and it was just all kinds of political interweavings and machinations and just all kinds of stuff going on. And it was fun. It certainly was not what I expected, but I mean, that's the power of RPG. When your players get into it, it becomes greater than the sum of its parts, basically.
Yeah. Aaron, anything like that before?
Not really. I think with the animated series, there's so many things that haven't been explored already that you don't really need to invent necessarily a new one. The Vidalia, I think, would be really interesting to explore more, though, because like they seem to they're supposedly the oldest spacefaring race that is around. Of course, this is from 1973, so take it with a grain of salt. But they have the ability to sort of like freeze time or reverse time. There's weird things that they can do, and I think it would be really interesting to figure out why they think that they are basically the space police. Like what is giving them the right to do all these things? You know, they help squash a rebellion of the score, but who asked them to do that? You know,
right? Yeah, I like the Babylon 5 concept too of politics, like the space station that's kind of like the center ground of all these different disparate like there's Deep Space Nine, but we have not seen on Star Trek something like Babylon 5.
Yeah.
Like one space station that's kind of like neutral ground, which would be kind of fun to see and play out. I think where you come here, it's safe, you know, but
there's a whole lot more. Oh, sorry. So there's a whole lot more species in the Star Trek universe too than Babylon 5. It seems like.
Yeah, so maybe it's a planet that's neutral ground, which would be very interesting. We haven't.
One thing that I found just like researching like how international politics work in general, international laws are basically just handshake agreements between two nations. There's no one above them keeping them in line. So the Khitomer Accords are only as enforceable as your phaser array.
Yeah, exactly. Very good.
How about you, Michael? Have you created any original political entities for your any of your games?
Yeah. The one that's been most impactful was because we focused a lot on Romulans, is the real Romulan Empire, which is 4 layers deep of the onion. And my players ended up figuring out who really runs the Romulan Empire and they chose to leave it that way, even though it didn't benefit the Federation. Because they respected their right to run their area how they want to run it, and respected their privacy. Like, we don't need to know everything. We don't have the right to ask you all these questions and demand that and make you an enemy just because you say no. We're not going to tell you everything, all our secrets. And again, you can probably see the overlay of what's happening in the real world, where anytime there's somebody who's not understood, they're made an enemy. That's what the premise I was playing off of there is, like, respect people's sovereign right to make their own decisions culturally, and they don't owe you an explanation. They don't owe you an explanation ever. They don't owe you. And we just ran on that. And by the time they had dug in that deep, they're like, yeah, we're siding with them on this. This is prime directive level material. If their thing is secrecy, what right do we have to demand otherwise and launch a war against them? So I was really I love in our game, the Romulans are actually the heroes and are a very respected species, of which our team has helped them pass the supernova. So that's our story in there. So let me ask you this. How do you encourage players then to role play political ideologies, especially suppose if their ideologies differ from Starfleet's ideals? Like, I think of Roleplaying when I think about that question. Like how do you, because you don't want to irritate. Like, I don't want my players don't argue. They don't get into it and hate each other after a session. We make sure to have a lot of session zero. So what would you do to encourage your players to role play political ideologies, create a little conflict in the game, but still stay friendly at the table?
I mean, that just sounds like a value. Like, just have your value be this ideology, and occasionally you just lean into that, and I'm doing this thing because that's what my value says, and I'm getting into it.
Love that. I could just see Kira like, I truly believe Cisco is the emissary as a value, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that. That's really good. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think I think I would just leave it to the players. I think if any of the player characters have values that are politically related, or in that vein, then I would encourage them, hey, lean into those values, or I would create situations that would test or challenge those values. If I ended up with a group of player characters and none of them had values that were politically oriented, I don't think I would encourage them to role play that direction, because it seems to be not something that they're interested in. Unlike you, Michael, I don't like generating conflict for the sake of generating conflict. So like, if they're not interested in having those kind of political, moral challenges placed upon their characters, I probably wouldn't push them that hard. But if they put it on their character sheet, then I would absolutely test it, and I would absolutely encourage them to think about their values and focuses, and play them through.
But wouldn't you create directives maybe sometimes? Like, what if they're given directives from Starfleet that conflict against their values? They're given a political directive from Starfleet to play against their values. Would you run from that?
No, I would. I mean, directives are open season, man. I would absolutely. If they're not being challenged by their values, then I would drop some directives on them, and not so much force them into a moral situation, but at least present the opportunity, and then just kind of see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
See, I get tricky, and sometimes I put like two directives that are like diametrically opposed to each other. Like, one directive is explore this site, find out everything you can about it, and the other directive is ensure no one else can gain control of this site. So at all costs, blow it up. and sometimes they gave that at split. Like, okay, I like, we need to figure out what's going on here. Do we dig deeper into the mystery, or do we just blow it up?
Yeah.
One thing I found interesting with the last Excelsior is they had a reporter on the ship for a while. So you had the ability just to basically probe at every single person and like find something that, just gets under their skin. So you learned a lot more about, like, okay, this is the captain is Bajoran and this is what he believes in. And so it was kind of a nice little, meta sort of way of interviewing your characters.
Oh,
that was pretty cool.
I love that. That's so Star Trek.
It was a Tellarite too, which is a lot of fun.
That's even
a Tellarite reporter.
I don't know if you all read Star Trek Vanguard or not, but there's a journalist is one of the key characters in the whole 7 series book, and they're from start to finish one of the most intriguing characters, because they have the duty to report, but then they start landing on stuff like, if I report this stuff, I'm starting a war. I love that. I love that idea. Maybe my next.
I have a right to the truth. Like, no. This truth loop's bad. Starfleet has secrets for reasons.
Yeah,
That's true.
I love the idea of playing like a Jake Sisko as a character in a campaign. Completely civilian, you're kind of on your own, but you have some freedom. I love that idea.
I want to play a Federation News Service character.
With like from Star Trek 6 when they got the cameras up, like a whole camera on their headset, and they're taking pictures of everything.
Or
early Google
look at
glasses.
Picard season 1. Picard season 1. She pushed Picard to blow up. Like, man. Oh man. Okay. I'm on stun level number 2 now. Black Alert. That would be cool too.
So is that 2 injuries?
That's 2 injuries. Yeah. I'm spending all my stress right now. Like 2 stress points left before I pass out. I love things like that. Okay, let's get toward wrapping. I got to ask this question then. So what tools or systems in or out of D20, 2D20 mechanics help you manage political consequences over time? I know that's key because if you play like episodic, or if you only get 1 or 2 sessions at the convention, this doesn't apply. But if you're playing a long-term game, how do you think mechanics can play into over time, showing the effects of politics?
I've been digging in really deep into the tactical campaign system, and just using that as a layer on top of the players' adventures, saying, well, there's other stuff happening over here, and I'm just like assigning that, okay, the book says Klingons, but I'm friendly with the Klingons, so I'm going to change it to this other species. This other species is starting in trouble. I also have like a very detailed chart where each faction and basically has a clock of like some project that they're working towards. They're working towards, or it's like they're trying to get a space station down, and I allow my players to put acclaim points into specific projects that they want, saying, hey, I think this is a good idea. I want to push forth, and let's help the DNs get their space station built. Or they could do the other thing and say, no, I'm going to spend my acclaim and I want to take work away from them. I'm going to interfere with their project, and just allow them to interact with it that way, kind of on a more meta level.
Yeah, I like that. I think the 2D20 system also with the values, we go back to values for a second, that the way it plays, I'm not going to go into the great breakdown of exactly how it works, but if anybody wants to, Alex GM on his YouTube channel has a great explanation of how the story arcs carry with values. But if you create political episodes and your players challenge their values, you could maybe require them to maybe create a value in relation to the political event that happened, whether for or against, and say, well, each time you've tested this value, it's been one of these more politically based campaign episodes. So I need you to take a stance. You can't, neutral is a stance, by the way. I do agree, neutral is a stance, but they have to like maybe reshape their value to that. And I think that the 2D20 system might play into that. What do you think, Jim?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the campaign. Like none of my campaigns I've never really needed a mechanical element to keep track of that kind of stuff. It's usually just been taking notes and like just seeing what happens. But I can see an instance where if your campaign is kind of centered around a particular part of the galaxy, and maybe one of your group, your crew's goals is to like, we need to befriend this polity, and at some point we need to become allies with them. And maybe an example of this is Sisko trying to get the Bajorans to eventually join the Federation. Maybe that is a big extended task, right? Over a very long period of time. And over that very long period of time, certain events happen that create progress, and certain events happen that create, I guess maybe even a challenge, setbacks. And then there's milestones along the way. And then, so as things, move along, eventually you get to the end point. It's like, oh, do they finally join, or do they finally decide not to join? And you can kind of like follow that track. And it would include, character arcs for Sisko and character arcs for other characters. And, maybe one of the gateways is one of the main characters has to get a value or trait that's friend of the Bajorans or enemy of the Cardassians or something like that. So I can see that would be a mechanical way of tracking it. I don't know that I would personally get into that level of detail, though.
Well, actually, you sparked something that I have done before. Because if you use, say, for instance, if you have Cisco with the extended task to create peace, Kai Wynn has an extended consequence. Gold Dukat also has an extended consequence. At each point, if Gold Dukat or Kai Wynn get ahead, they get a setback onto Cisco. Cisco, if he gets breakthroughs ahead of them, he's able to get ahead of their track. So you can actually have them in a race based off what happens in each episode. You could be like, well, if it goes this way, they progress on track. So I play that in our game where I actually have extended tasks going at the same time, extended consequences, and sometimes the extended consequences end up first. So each political ideology could be its own track, and after each episode, you kind of roll and see who got where.
Yeah,
right.
Interesting.
Might be a fun way to do that.
Interesting.
Oh, fun stuff. Let's go around one more time about politics and factions and Star Trek. Any final words or any comments? Aaron, why don't you launch us?
I would just really like to dive into some of the TAS races, which I know is like, that's my thing, but it's just sort of like,
cool.
It's, the Dojin, it looks like we're going to have a live action Dojin in Strange New Worlds, and they're not part of the Federation. So I'm really hoping that they like stick with that, because this would be before TOS. But it'd be interesting. I think they just never become part of the Federation. They're always there. They're always allies. So that would be really interesting to explore people who are like, I don't have any desire to join the Federation. I don't dislike you. I just don't want to be part of you.
Love that. I have a dream, by the way. Me and Jim were talking about it the other day, where if Strange New Worlds continues and it starts butting up against, the original series, that maybe we'll actually see live action Imres and Eric one day.
That would be cool.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Well, Eric's is around. I think he's probably in Starfleet at this point. So
yeah, wouldn't it be great to see them in live action?
Supposedly he's like their best pilot at this point, or one of them. Yeah.
I think the teaser for season 3 of Strange New Worlds has an Edosian bartender.
Yep.
Exactly.
Doing drinks with all 3 arms. And so I mean, it's certainly doable, right? It's just whether or not he's like a main character or not, I don't know.
Correct. All right, cool. So again, the question stands. We're going on our final go round here. Aaron went. So Jim, what about you? What do you think? Final word on politics and factions and Star Trek Adventures.
I think just I'll lean on the low hanging fruit and just say get your players on board and like do that session 0 and be really clear about what they want. Like there is like I think Aaron mentioned earlier in the show that there is so much great material already in place in canon for the Romulans, Cardassians, Klingons, Ferengi, Bajorans. I mean, there's so much great material there already to play with that a lot of your players might want to just stick with the Alpha Beta Quadrant and those known entities and really play with those, as opposed to going off and creating your own stuff. Like I know the value of West March's style gaming, creating your own worlds, creating your own universes, and just getting away from what's already known so that you don't impinge on canon. But just really try to get your group on board and don't throw a curveball at them and like they're expecting a certain kind of campaign, then you're like, oh, but we're going to go way over here.
Right, has to be all agreed upon. I agree. Yeah. Will, I know you were having some video issues. Are you with us to talk about your final words on politics and factions in Star Trek? Oh, no, he was having some issues. So hopefully he'll come back by the time we do gratitude. All right, well, let's do gratitude and hopefully he'll come back and we'll catch him up on that. So Aaron, you want to do your gratitude? Then I'll do mine and then Jim.
I have to admit, I do not remember what this is because it's been a long time since I've been on the show.
You can say anything in the universe, whatever you're grateful for. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually just lately grateful all of my friends who are virtual, who are Star Trek fans, just because it's been really kind of tough lately, just about and staying home a lot. So actually having groups of people who I get to watch a show on Discord with, I still feel like I have a group of they are real live friends who are just, not physically with me. So I am very grateful that exists, because if it didn't, I feel like I'd be going crazy right now. So It's been really, really nice. I appreciate it.
Oh, good. Well, friends do matter. What about Will? What's your gratitude going out of this show?
I'm I'm grateful to my players for challenging me to tell good stories and encouraging me to get better at the craft. I'm thankful to the community for giving me ideas and feedback and just the wonderful, encouraging environment we have on being able to tell all these stories and share them with each other.
Yeah. Well, since we're talking about politics and factions, I'm going to say my gratitude goes to U.S. News and World Report as one. Why? Because I don't know why, but when I was 10 years old, I got a subscription to them. You know, you used to have those little licky stamps so you could pick what you want a subscription to. And I choose U.S. News and World Report. So since age 10, I read that cover to cover, even when I didn't understand it. But it gave me such insight about politics, even though I'm not affiliated. I'm very neutral, but I still think it's important to know world history and knows what's going on around you. So U.S. News and World Report, and I'm actually going to also give a huge gratitude to NPR, which might get pulled federal funding, which would be kind of sad because I have always loved PBS NewsHour. So that, I just felt it lands mostly in the middle, not all the time. So I do want to thank good, honest, truthful news reporting historians, librarians, and encourage people read more because you will figure out the truth. The more you read, the more you hear the sound of truth. Do not get all your information from one source. So I want to thank all of that. I know that informs my games and makes me, I think our players and our games a little bit more elevated in the sense of how we tackle social issues. So I want to thank those amazing news organizations. Jim, take us out with your gratitude.
I've got two. The first one is I am grateful for all the historians out there in the past and the present who have written amazing histories, biographies, history books, politics, whatever, especially the historians who provide a balanced perspective. I'm reading a great book right now on the American Revolution, and the historian has made a very strong effort to provide a balanced picture of both the British side of things and the American side of things. I think I've read enough that it always slants toward one to the other, and sometimes it's pretty obvious where the slant is, but this particular one is really, really nicely balanced, and I appreciate that because it gives me both sides, all sides of it. So I'm really grateful for historians. So yeah, I echo Michael, absolutely read a lot because you'll see a much broader perspective than just siloing yourself into one particular thing. And then the second gratitude is to all the fans for Star Trek Adventures and Star Trek in general. We wouldn't be doing this game after 9+ years now without you. We wouldn't be doing this podcast probably without you. We would probably be talking into the ether anyway, but because the conversation always continues. But it's always nice to know that there's people out there listening, enjoying the show, and like Will, being willing to come on the show with us. Super fan now on the podcast. I'm sure we'll have you back because it's great to listen to you. Aaron, always a pleasure to talk to you as well. Thank you to the fans, and thank you for sticking with us for so long. And I hope you stick around a little bit longer because we've got some really cool stuff coming up here. So thank you, and thank you, and thank you.
All right. Well, everyone else, IDIC.
Live long and prosper. Be safe, be well. We'll talk to you all next time.